Good evening. In the gilded, carefully choreographed world of the British monarchy, where every gesture is steeped in symbolism and every silence invites interpretation, a fresh wave of intrigue has reportedly gripped palace corridors. At the center of it all lies an explosive claim, one that has sparked intense speculation among royal watchers, that Queen Elizabeth II's will may have favored Catherine, Princess of Wales, in ways that have left Queen Camilla deeply unsettled. It's a story that, like many involving the royal family, exists in a delicate space between rumor and reality. There has been no official confirmation of such details, and the contents of royal wills are traditionally kept private. Yet the mere suggestion has been enough to ignite conversations across media platforms, drawing attention not only because of what it alleges, but because of what it represents: power, legacy, and the quiet tensions that can exist within even the most structured institutions. The narrative began, as many modern royal stories do, with whispers, unverified reports circulating among commentators and insiders claiming that certain provisions in the late Queen's will place particular emphasis on Catherine, the future Queen consort. At first, the claims were vague. References to special consideration, personal bequests, and symbolic gestures appeared in scattered commentary. But as the story spread, it gained sharper edges. Some reports suggested that Catherine had been entrusted with heirlooms of deep personal significance. Others hinted at financial arrangements or private letters that underscored a unique bond between the late monarch and her granddaughter-in-law. None of these claims have been substantiated by official sources, but their emotional impact has been undeniable. Royal wills are not public documents. Unlike many legal estates, the wills of senior royals are often sealed, a practice that has been upheld for decades to protect the privacy of the family and the integrity of the institution. This secrecy, while intentional, creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, speculation thrives. Without access to verified information, even the smallest suggestion can grow into a full-fledged narrative. In this case, the idea that Queen Elizabeth II may have expressed a preference, real or perceived, has become the focal point of intense interest. It's not just about who received what. It's about what those choices might mean. To understand why such claims would resonate, it's important to consider Queen Camilla's position within the royal family. Her journey to the role of Queen Consort was neither simple nor universally accepted. For years, her relationship with King Charles III was the subject of public controversy. Over time, however, she has worked to establish her place within the monarchy, taking on duties, supporting charitable causes, and gradually reshaping public perception. By the time of Queen Elizabeth II's passing, Camilla's role had been formally recognized and endorsed. The late Queen herself expressed her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort, a statement that carried immense weight. Yet acceptance within the institution does not erase the complexities of personal dynamics. The royal family, for all its public formality, is still a family. And like any family, it contains layers of history, emotion, and unspoken understanding. Catherine, Princess of Wales, occupies a different space, one defined not by controversy, but by continuity. Since her marriage to Prince William, she's been widely seen as a stabilizing presence within the royal family. Her public image is carefully managed, her role clearly defined, and her future position as Queen Consort widely anticipated. Over the years, Catherine developed a close relationship with Queen Elizabeth II. Their interactions, often subtle and understated, suggested mutual respect and trust. From shared appearances to private guidance, the late Queen appeared to take an active interest in preparing Catherine for her future role. In that context, the idea that Catherine might have been favored in the Queen's will, whether through personal items or symbolic gestures, feels to some observers plausible. But plausible does not mean proven. What does it mean for a will to favor one person over another? In legal terms, it could refer to financial allocations or property distribution. In emotional terms, it could mean something far less tangible: a handwritten letter, a piece of jewelry, or a private message intended to convey trust or affection. In royal contexts, symbolism often outweighs substance. A single heirloom can carry generations of meaning. A private note can signal a deeper connection than any public statement. If such gestures exist, they may not reflect exclusion or imbalance. They may simply reflect relationships, individual, personal, and shaped over time. But when viewed from the outside, those nuances can be lost. Reports of Camilla's alleged frustration or anger must be approached with caution. There has been no official statement confirming such emotions, and much of the narrative appears to be based on interpretation rather than direct evidence. Still, the idea has captured attention. Why? Because it taps into a broader fascination with royal dynamics. The idea that behind the composed public image lies a network of private feelings and rivalries. Whether or not those tensions exist in the way they are described, they provide a compelling lens through which audiences interpret events. In many cases, the reaction becomes part of the story, even if it is speculative. The period following Queen Elizabeth II's passing has been one of transition. King Charles III has assumed the throne, bringing with him a vision for a streamlined monarchy. Roles have shifted, responsibilities have evolved, and the balance of influence has adjusted accordingly. In this environment, even small changes can feel significant. The relationship between senior figures, Camilla, William, and Catherine, will play a crucial role in shaping the monarchy's future. Public unity is essential. Private understanding is even more so. Stories that suggest division, whether accurate or not, challenge that perception of unity. One of the most striking aspects of this story is how actively the public participates in shaping it. Through social media, commentary, and discussion, audiences don't just consume royal narratives, they contribute to them. Interpretations are shared, debated, and amplified. The line between observer and participant becomes blurred. This collective engagement can bring attention to important issues, but it can also magnify speculation, turning uncertain claims into widely accepted beliefs. In the case of the Queen's will, the lack of concrete information has allowed imagination to fill the gaps. For journalists and commentators, stories like this present a challenge. On one hand, there is clear public interest. On the other, there is a responsibility to distinguish between verified information and unconfirmed claims. The most responsible approach lies in transparency, acknowledging what is known, what is alleged, and what remains unclear. In this case, what is known is limited. The rest is interpretation. At its core, this story is about legacy. Queen Elizabeth II's legacy is one of continuity, duty, and stability. Any suggestion that her final decisions might reflect personal preference invites scrutiny, not because it diminishes her legacy, but because it adds complexity to it. If she did, in private, express particular trust in Catherine, it could be seen as part of her effort to ensure the future of the monarchy. If not, the narrative still reveals how strongly people associate Catherine with that future. Either way, the focus returns to the same question. How will the next generation carry forward what has been left behind? Beyond titles and traditions, there are human relationships. Camilla, Catherine, Charles, and William are not just public figures. They are individuals navigating roles that come with immense pressure. Their interactions are shaped not only by duty, but by personality, history, and emotion. Speculation about conflict can overshadow this human element, reducing complex relationships to simple narratives of rivalry or resentment. Reality is rarely that simple. Perhaps the most important aspect of this story is what remains unsaid. There is no confirmed evidence of the will's contents. There is no verified account of Camilla's reaction. There is, however, a powerful narrative that continues to evolve. In the absence of certainty, interpretation takes center stage. The claim that Queen Elizabeth II's will favored Catherine, sparking frustration from Camilla, is, at this stage, a story driven more by speculation than substantiated fact. Yet its impact lies not in its verification, but in its resonance. It speaks to enduring questions about power, legacy, and the relationships that shape both. It reflects a public eager to understand the inner workings of an institution that has long balanced transparency with tradition, and it serves as a reminder that in the world of the monarchy, the most compelling stories are not always the ones that are proven, but the ones that reveal how people see, interpret, and imagine the lives behind the crown. Until more information emerges, if it ever does, the palace buzz will remain exactly that, a conversation, not a conclusion. As the narrative surrounding the late Queen's will continues to ripple through public conversation, something subtle but significant begins to take shape. Perception starts to harden into belief, not because new facts have emerged, but because the story has been told, retold, and reshaped, enough times that it begins to feel familiar. And familiarity in the modern media cycle often passes for truth. In this phase, the question is no longer, did this happen? But rather, what does this say about them? That shift matters. Because once a story becomes interpretive rather than factual, it becomes far more difficult to resolve. Historically, the royal household has relied on a principle that is both simple and effective: contain what you can and outlast what you can't. It's a strategy built on patience rather than reaction. Controversies rise, dominate headlines, and eventually give way to the next wave of attention. The institution, meanwhile, remains steady, at least on the surface. But that strategy depends on a key condition: that the narrative remains manageable. In today's environment, where stories can evolve in real time across global platforms, containment is more challenging than ever. A rumor that might once have faded quietly can now be revived, reframed, and reintroduced indefinitely. The Camilla versus Catherine narrative, fueled by speculation about the Queen's will, is a perfect example of this shift. One of the reasons this story resonates so strongly is that it taps into a familiar archetype: rivalry. Even without concrete evidence, the idea of tension between two senior royal women, one representing the present, the other the future, fits neatly into a narrative structure that audiences recognize. Camilla, as queen consort, embodies a journey of resilience and gradual acceptance. Catherine, as Princess of Wales, represents continuity, youth, and the next chapter of the monarchy. Placed side by side, they are often framed not as allies, but as contrasts. This framing is not necessarily rooted in reality. In public, their interactions have been composed, respectful, and aligned with royal protocol. But narratives are not always built on observation. They are built on interpretation, and interpretation often seeks drama. Royal stories rarely exist in isolation. They are shaped by the past as much as the present. For many observers, the current narrative echoes earlier chapters in royal history, moments when relationships within the family were perceived as strained or competitive. Those memories, whether accurate or simplified over time, influence how new stories are understood. Camilla's past, particularly her role in one of the most scrutinized relationships in modern royal history, continues to inform how she is perceived. Catherine's trajectory, marked by careful preparation and widespread public approval, positions her differently. When a story suggests imbalance, real or imagined, those historical impressions come into play. In royal life, details are rarely just details. A piece of jewelry, a seating arrangement, a public gesture, each can be interpreted as carrying meaning. In the absence of confirmed information about the Queen's will, these symbolic elements take on even greater significance. If Catherine is seen wearing a particular heirloom, it may be viewed as confirmation of a deeper connection. If Camilla appears in a different context, it may be interpreted as a subtle shift in status or influence. These interpretations are not always grounded in fact, but they are powerful because they rely on the idea that nothing in royal life is accidental. As the story evolves, it enters a feedback loop. Media outlets report on public reaction. Public reaction is influenced by media coverage. Social platforms amplify both. Each cycle adds another layer to the narrative, making it more complex and often more detached from its original source. In this loop, speculation can gain a kind of legitimacy, not because it has been proven, but because it has been discussed. For audiences trying to make sense of the story, this creates a challenge, distinguishing between what is reported, what is inferred, and what is simply imagined. Perhaps the most important distinction in this story is the one that is hardest to see: the difference between private reality and public narrative. Inside the royal family, relationships are shaped by shared experiences, personal conversations, and moments that will never be publicly documented. Outside, those same relationships are interpreted through fragments, appearances, statements, and in this case, unverified claims. The gap between those two perspectives can be vast. What appears as tension from the outside may, in reality, be routine. What is interpreted as favoritism may simply reflect personal connection. Without access to the full picture, the public narrative becomes a kind of projection. While this story may seem like a matter of personal dynamics, it carries broader implications. The monarchy relies in part on public confidence, on the perception that it is stable, cohesive, and guided by a sense of continuity. Narratives that suggest division, even if unproven, can challenge that perception. For King Charles III, maintaining that sense of unity is essential. For Camilla and Catherine, their roles are not just individual, they are representative of the institution as a whole. How they are perceived, individually and together, contributes to the overall image of the monarchy. Despite the intensity of the discussion, the central questions remain unanswered. What, if anything, did the Queen's will specify beyond standard arrangements? Were there personal gestures that have been interpreted as favoritism? And perhaps most importantly, how much of the current narrative is rooted in fact versus perception? At present, there is no verified information that provides clear answers, and in the absence of answers, the story continues. Some stories build toward a conclusion, a moment when facts are established and questions are resolved. Others do not. The narrative surrounding the Queen's will appears for now to fall into the latter category. Without official disclosure, it is unlikely that definitive details will emerge. The story may evolve, but it may never fully resolve. Instead, it will exist as part of a broader tapestry of royal commentary, one thread among many, contributing to the ongoing conversation about the monarchy and its future. In the end, the idea that Queen Elizabeth II's will may have favored Catherine, sparking frustration from Camilla, tells us less about the will itself and more about the world in which the story is being told. It reveals a public fascinated by the inner workings of a famously private institution. It highlights the power of narrative in shaping perception, and it underscores the challenge of separating fact from interpretation in an age where information moves faster than verification. Whether the claims hold any truth may never be fully known, but the story, driven by curiosity, amplified by speculation, and sustained by imagination, will continue to echo long after the initial headlines fade. By now, the narrative has reached a curious turning point. The original claim that Queen Elizabeth II's will may have favored Catherine has almost become secondary to the reaction it has generated. The story about the story is now the headline. Commentators dissect reactions, analysts debate implications, social media threads spiral into detailed interpretations of events that have not been officially confirmed. The conversation feeds on itself, growing more intricate with each retelling. And in that process, something subtle happens. The narrative gains a sense of permanence. It is no longer just a rumor passing through the news cycle. It becomes part of the broader mythology that surrounds the royal family, a story that may be referenced, reinterpreted, and revisited long after its origins are forgotten. Timing plays a crucial role in why this particular narrative has taken hold. The monarchy is still in a period of adjustment following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. King Charles III is shaping his reign, redefining priorities, and navigating public expectations. At the same time, Prince William and Catherine are stepping more fully into their roles as future leaders of the institution. This moment of transition creates a heightened sensitivity to anything that might signal change, especially when it comes to influence and legacy. A claim about the Queen's will, even an unverified one, fits neatly into this context. It suggests continuity on one hand and potential imbalance on the other. That tension makes it compelling. One word appears again and again in discussions of this story: reportedly. It is a small word, but it carries significant weight. It allows a claim to be introduced without being fully endorsed. It creates distance between the speaker and the statement, while still allowing the idea to circulate. Reportedly furious. Reportedly favored. Reportedly unsettled. Each use adds another layer to the narrative, without providing concrete evidence. Over time, the repetition of such phrases can blur the line between possibility and probability. What begins as speculation starts to feel like established knowledge, even when it isn't. The royal family has always occupied a unique place in the public imagination. They are real people, but they are also symbols, figures onto whom audiences project ideas about tradition, power, and identity. Stories like this thrive in that space. They invite interpretation. They encourage audiences to fill in gaps, to imagine conversations that never took place, to assign meaning to actions that may have been routine. In the absence of confirmed details, imagination becomes a kind of co-author. And once imagination takes hold, it can be difficult to separate what is envisioned from what is verified. Another reason this narrative resonates is that it sits at the intersection of the personal and the institutional. On one level, it is about individuals, Camilla and Catherine, their roles, their relationship, their place within the family. On another, it is about the monarchy itself, how it evolves, how it manages transition, how it balances tradition with change. These two levels are deeply interconnected. A personal gesture, such as a bequest in a will, can be interpreted as an institutional signal. A private relationship can be viewed as a reflection of broader dynamics within the monarchy. This duality adds depth to the story, but also complexity. For those at the center of the narrative, the experience is not abstract. Living under constant scrutiny means that even the most personal aspects of life can become subjects of public debate. Relationships are analyzed. Decisions are questioned. Silence is interpreted. In such an environment, maintaining a sense of normalcy is a challenge. For Camilla, who has spent years navigating public perception, the idea of renewed scrutiny, especially tied to deeply personal matters, would not be insignificant. For Catherine, whose role continues to expand, the weight of expectation grows with each new narrative. Neither of them has publicly addressed the claims, but the impact of the conversation exists regardless. It is worth returning, again and again, to a simple fact. There has been no official confirmation of the claims surrounding the Queen's will, no verified document, no authoritative statement, no clear evidence. What exists instead is a network of interpretations, some thoughtful, some speculative, some driven by genuine curiosity, others by the desire for a compelling story. In responsible journalism, that distinction matters. In many ways, this narrative says as much about the audience as it does about the subjects. It reflects a desire to understand what happens behind closed doors. It reveals a fascination with hierarchy, with legacy, with the subtle dynamics of power. It highlights the ways in which people interpret incomplete information based on their own perspectives. Some see favoritism, others see mentorship, some see tension, others see continuity. The same story, viewed through different lenses, produces entirely different conclusions. Will this story have lasting consequences? That depends. If it remains unverified, it may gradually fade, replaced by new developments and new narratives. But even then, it may leave behind a trace, a lingering impression that shapes how future events are interpreted. If, on the other hand, new information were to emerge, clarifying or contradicting the claims, it could redefine the narrative entirely. For now, it exists in a state of suspension, widely discussed, yet unresolved. As the conversation continues, one thing becomes clear. The palace buzz is less about a single document and more about the enduring fascination with the monarchy itself. It is about how stories are formed, how they spread, and how they evolve. It is about the interplay between fact and perception, between privacy and public interest. And perhaps most of all, it is about the human tendency to seek meaning, even when the full picture remains out of view. In the end, whether Queen Elizabeth II's will favored Catherine in any significant way may never be fully known. But the story it has inspired, layered, complex, and deeply revealing, will continue to echo, shaped not just by what is true, but by what people believe could be true.